Special thanks to Anu and Tartu Observatory. We at Daytel both partnered with her team to develop our systems and in turn have sponsored the latest of Estonia's 2 student satellites. Our thanks to the people of Estonia, the European Space Agency for their spacecraft, and the European Commission for Copernicus, all of which are making this event possible today. I'm Carl from Daytel, and I love space. Spaceships, space food, space data, and particularly 1960s space clothing styles. Each of us is here for a reason today, with a curiosity underscoring them all. The thing I've been most curious about is why isn't everyone using Copernicus data already? Something so transformative sitting there in your web browsers for so many years until you have it kind of explode into your life and explode into your business and transform everything you do, as you said, Mark. Copernicus by itself is just the name of a very brilliant, very dead guy. Copernicus data and you can be a catalyst for change, one that can change the world. Many orbits ago, I was a boy hiding among countless jackets and gear in my grandfather's home in Connecticut in the northeastern United States. Now, those jackets had a huge logo on them, one covered in stars with this fancy red swoosh. I'd walk around staring at pictures of spacecraft on the walls, and then inevitably I made my way to this rather small desk where you'd find me trying to make my best sense of Maxwell's equations, which in an odd twist of fate I'm still doing today. We would spend hours together and an eternity in the field staring at the moon. I had so many questions. Why did the jackets have NASA on them? What was inertial navigation? How did it feel installing those systems into Apollo? And did he also get to eat astronaut ice cream at work? I mean, let's be clear, have our priorities here. I wanted to understand what it meant to look at the night sky and see not only beauty, but a ship, like a star flying overhead, and know that I had a hand in its work. And that's why we're all here today, because somewhere, someone reached us and led us to dream a little farther, and we never stopped. Despite what some may think, Earth observation is not only algorithms and drowning lists of perfected science and institutes. It's never been arbitrary data for the sake of data. We went to the moon to show humanity just how far we could reach. We launched the Sentinels and opened their data to show just how space touches each of us. Copernicus exists not only to have epic open data bragging rights over the planet, it exists to make an impact in governments, science, and businesses across Europe. The best motivator in the world is impact, that ability to affect change. And that's precisely why I came to and fell in love with Estonia. After all, as an American, a place so young and with a passion to prove itself to the world seemed like the most American thing I could imagine to be a part of. The story of Daytel and how we came about discovering the power of this data starts with the recent history of the country. Estonia is a country shaping the future of our world. It invented Skype and Hotmail, blockchain for government, yet it's as mysterious as its secret language. The answer to its Lord of the Rings-like story lies in tragedy. A peaceful and bright nation plunged into decades of darkness by occupation of the Soviet Union, left it off of the maps and out of the history books. 1991 brought to reality the dream of millions, the lifting of that darkness, the symbolic opening of the very building that we're sitting in today, a national library. With the end of occupation, Estonia ventured out into the dawn. Its finances, its people, were depleted by years of oppression. And with no significant natural resources, Estonians face a critical moment best captured in a single story. To accept a free wired phone system from Finland, or invest what few resources we had into the first national cellular network, invent a new path, or follow behind the West. It's never been about technology, it's always been about our people. We all know the countless stories of the costliest, amazing software and space systems that go unused, like a costly tech graveyard. In Estonia, perhaps it was that nightmare that proved its miracle. For years, simply having an Estonian flag was illegal. Hidden in the floorboards of every home was a symbol of who they were to be in 1991. A social cohesion, a togetherness that defined the concept of early adopter. This made Estonia the perfect place to adopt the use of this invisible data being collected from space all around us. An early adopter once more, this time with Earth observation data. Trust is a key ingredient in unlocking the usage of Earth observation tools, particularly when to many their abilities seem impossible. After all, how can you determine the algae level in my pond and if I've cut my grass field or not from hundreds of kilometers in space? A generation ago, Estonians lived in an economy where simply purchasing basic goods could be impossible, where you could get ahead for your family by snitching on your neighbor. Yet with the curtain lifted, they began to trust each other at a rate jumping ahead of Western countries. An undying belief in Estonia, a trust in the state, burst forward and gave the ingredients to leap into smart cities and e-government before those buzzwords even existed. To best technology, but how can we promote trust in a computer? We must make it better than a human, more ethical, more open, simpler, and without a motive to cheat you. This fiscally conservative policy was one of the keys into our entry with Copernicus data. Estonia has few bridge inspectors and no budget for an army of drones flying around with photogrammetry. But what if we could inspect the nation's infrastructure from space on a zero-cost raw data set and integrate it into our existing spatial systems? Efficiency created necessity for web services to move data from point to point, and our super creepy neighbor next door provided the necessity for security and transit of that data. Thus, blockchain for government was born, again before it was cool, and with it the X-Road, a network service architecture linking all the state platforms. Now, the same system that defends Estonia's state infrastructure defends the integrity of data moving from the Sentinels to Copernicus and the ESA hubs. E-Estonia was born, a symbol for a new path, and Daytel, our company, and Estonia's very first IT enterprise at its helm. A startup of former Soviet engineers began writing a new history. Back then, it wasn't all co-working spaces, pitch decks, and high-gloss conferences. While painting their first office, word came over the radio that Soviet tanks were returning to Tallinn to cut off Estonia's communications. The founders ran out to the TV tower, joining with thousands of Estonians, miraculously keeping the lines open until the troops left. Understanding Soviet computers better than anyone, we had a very special task. Built an Estonian geospatial mapping system to give people back their land. You see, the Soviets thought it was fashionable to take your house, your land, sometimes even your life. So when they left, all of that belonged to you. And hopefully you were still around. It was this repatriation of assets that led to the corruption stories of most former Soviet-occupied territories. And E-Estonia helped save us all from that fate. As a former president used to enjoy remarking, you cannot bribe a computer. Location isn't only for real estate agents, it's foremost for governments. Where are you? Who are you? What zoning is under you? Can you build that shed? Whose cows are polluting our rivers? Our GIS systems have been employing space data since the first time we were able to use optical satellite imagery. Buzzwords, from startup to smart city, are always an individual's idea, different for each one of us. Estonian cities were using systems like e-voting, digital-only construction platforms, and plan requests, all on the X-Road, all before anyone thought that was even the smart part of a smart city. Now Estonian cities are able to redefine smart once more with Earth observation data. Estonians have been explorers no matter who was stomping around downtown. They've never found a shortage of friends in America, in Europe, and in recent years they joined the European Space Agency as the next chapter in that wanderlust for adventure. They've worked together to launch satellites on rockets built in Russia. A unique and beautiful twist in the story of space exploration. Just as it is with the grandson of a NASA and Apollo engineer standing in a once Soviet-occupied nation speaking from an ESA-EU stage. I spent my life with a model of the Saturn V on my desk, one which is now on my son's. Blueprints of sonar systems lined my walls, and I had the radar system for the Eagle lander beside my bed before I even knew what the hell INSAR even was. Copernicus enables us to fetch and store the unimaginably massive data set from the twin Sentinel-1 INSAR spacecraft that have been orbiting the Earth for years now. They've overflown every structure on the planet before and after every event in recent history. They've seen bridges before they've collapsed, dams before and after they've failed, and they can show during a hurricane who is being worst affected, even when first responders cannot yet go out in the storm. Now the question is, why aren't more of us using this data? Today, I work with INSAR to the point that it's no longer an acronym, it's almost a feeling. Now thank God, too, because persistent scatter, interferometric, synthetic aperture radar time series kind of sounds like speaking with a mouthful of marbles. The technique was first used to survey the surface of the moon, actually, at the same time a secret satellite was launched to test the ability to determine damage extents of a nuclear bomb blast. The principle is that you could use physics to derive a mathematically massive radar array in orbit, a synthetic aperture. One which would be able to penetrate the clouds and see at night, that produced a pile of black and white images of the structures below. Soon thereafter, it was determined that if you were to stick a pile of those images on top of each other, and instead of looking at the reflections, looked at the phase shifts, you could determine motion over time of those structures. We at Daytel were inventing spatial technology before we had access to space. And now with it, we're able to make our state more efficient using satellite radar to revolutionize infrastructure inspections. Now, rail, infrastructure, and power operators can sit on their smartphones and check from spaceships connected to their web browsers the health of their buildings without ever touching them. People see this data as unbelievable, as black magic. How is it possible that a satellite hundreds of kilometers above us can determine the millimeter level motion of tremendous structures like a dam or even this library? Everyone is used to optical imaging, and yet still we have found new discoveries from that technique. Imagine what we can do with radar that we haven't conceived of as of yet. After all, each of us is in the space business. The only difference is if you recognize it or not. Countless value chains in nearly every business process can be observed, enhanced, and made more profitable with Earth observation data. INSAR from Sentinel-1 is like GPS before smartphones. A hyper-niche technique with a long history that is only now reaching into application development. Fueled by the open data of Copernicus, we are now free to innovate. This has given European firms a market advantage. We have faster access to massive data sets that we can leverage in clever ways. This has begun my long journey home to the United States, where as of this moment, governments and firms from San Francisco to Washington, D.C. are using space applications built here in Estonia. Those applications allow us to go back in time and see irresponsible mining practices which have triggered landslides so large they were first noticed by folks driving home from work as the earth literally cracked open above them. But we, from our laptop on our couch, could see that the earth had begun to crack open above them years beforehand, but no one was actually looking. The technique that we've used is PS INSAR, which has begun its life looking like an image on the left of the slide that is hating me intensely. Can Mr. Man who's running the computer please press the next button? Or something. There we go. An oil slick type thing there on the left shows a tremendous motion between images. It's an interferogram, and if you've ever used ESA Snap, then that's your friend. Go back. Before Copernicus and the Sentinels, there were many SAR spacecraft. You can see what a highly reflective target would look like to them on the right side of that slide. Their major downside was not only in their cost, it was in their temporal resolution. A fancy way to say how often they fly over you. The less frequent, the less accurate the data you get over time. Today we're able to use Sentinel-1 to resolve data at the millimeter scale, all without visiting a site. All those points you saw on that landslide before were determined contactlessly. We never went there. Their time series or history of movement is displayed in the graph in the background. Buildings and the earth move all the time. The trouble isn't in this elastic motion, it's in when something moves in one direction and never comes back. And we've connected all this to our own WebGIS platform and integrated it with engineering reports from local civil structural engineering firms around the world. See, our clients don't want just data. They also want an understanding of why it's happening and what to do about it. Copernicus has transformed our business dramatically. Years ago, I was standing on the Obama White House stage talking about rural economic development spatial platforms. Now today, I get to stand on the White House stage and talk about how America can benefit through partnerships with European firms powered by Copernicus. After all, spaceships make everything you're talking about just a hell of a lot cooler. Well, I absolutely love all things Mexico, particularly sombreros, guacamole, and those skull candies they have this time of year. I've never been to Mexico physically, but virtually I've been staring at this tremendous sinking crater of Mexico City from aquifer depletion while sitting cozy-like on my laptop in Tallinn enjoying a tasty margarita. That is Copernicus as a catalyst if there has ever been one. I know someone here has taken the ferry to Finland, probably, from the glorious terminal down the street from here. The crazy thing about ports is that before Copernicus, before INSAR, and before us, the only way to inspect a seawall was a dude in a boat with a camera. Now we can avoid putting dude in a boat and instead stare at them from space. The best part about this is we don't have to close down parts of a busy terminal to keep an eye on it. Now like you, I hope, I sincerely enjoy watching Star Trek episode reruns on Netflix at all hours of the day. But to do that, you gotta have the lights on. Critical infrastructure, like power stations, can be vulnerable to deformation and structural issues. One of the most fascinating things we have found with INSAR is that these facilities vibrate a lot, and the fatigue to the structure is reflected in its deformation history. This image is of a key Estonian power station, which is actually looking great, thank God, because I wouldn't show you anything too scary. Just imagine how heavy a nuclear reactor containment vessel is. Now imagine that structure was built next to a river in the 1960s. On soil calculations that never anticipated climate change and the increased high water events that come with it. And you see why this is so important. This is the 5th largest double curvature concrete dam in the world. And I'll tell you, it's not too much fun to hang off the top of it to inspect it, particularly when they want you to validate your results. It's also in the middle of nowhere, on top of a massive series of mountains and above thousands of people. That's why INSAR rocks. Here's a bunch of cliffs with rocks, fashionably, slowly sliding onto roads where you might be driving. And this is this building, which is fantastically directly beside my office building, which is a huge thanks to whoever chose the venue here today. You totally rock. Thanks, those folks in the Netherlands. A week or so ago, the now famous 16-year-old Swedish Greta Thunberg gave her impassioned plea at the UN in New York City to fight climate change with science. Next week, I land in New York City, where I'll brief the mayor on how, together with city and federal emergency management officials, we will employ Sentinel-1 radar data to defend against the next catastrophic hurricane. Land motion, which is half of the equation of sea level rise, has been missing for far too long. Together with Copernicus, we are here to fill in that gap. Now I stand at NASA headquarters discussing the launch of NISAR, America's INSAR spacecraft to come, which was inspired by Sentinel-1. There I advocate for America to partner with ESA in the next open Earth observation portal, as well as even more interesting things, such as the construction of the next International Space Station, only now the talk is that it's going to orbit the moon. We are all building bridges for the space community. Each of us is working with Copernicus as in part responsible for the future of space exploration. Like most people, John F. Kennedy is a hero to me for many reasons. NASA forefront among them. The president, when he was touring NASA headquarters for the first time, introduced himself to a janitor who was mopping the floor. And he asked him, what did he do there? And the man replied, I'm helping put a man on the moon. Regardless of our station in life, we each have a mission. It's up to each of us here today to advocate, to leave here as an advocate for and of space. When we go home and look up at the stars with our loved ones and tell them the story of the satellites that we learned about here today, we are like the heroes of our own novel. We don't know how it began or how it will end. We're trapped forever in the middle of the story. It's up to us to make it interesting, something worth reading. For me, that has come true in my hometown here. Now, I live in a small town about 45 minutes south, Rapla, Estonia, a place that has been growing in leaps and bounds over the few years that I have been there, part of its story. A few years ago when I arrived, I began going to visit the schools there. That is the real power of Estonia and the future of space, our youth. Back to, please. I felt that if we could just give rise to the voice of those students, we could enact real change. 2 days ago, another American and I opened a student-run cafe and co-working space, and it's packed with people buzzing around. And one of the first events we had on the agenda was how those students could use Copernicus data from anywhere, even Rapla, to build a business and change their world. After all, we are the perfect example of a company, one that was the first in the country and yet full of internal startups. We've embraced space, been transformed by it, and we are growing with it. That is how you do it. You don't let anyone tell you you can't. And when they do, you just smile and know that they're wrong. Let's continue to redefine adventure through trust, collaboration together, and a twist of fate. You're here with me now in this room, so it's up to you. What will you do with Copernicus data?
Inspirational talk. I really heard you speaking on space data, so I think the company will manage with this. So